I hope so. Many cases are cracked by deeply analyzing a person's language. This case file is so unusual and unlike anything we know, especially since 3 months later it remains unsolved. I can't help but feel there's something else lurking in the shadows of this cold case mystery. The only thing weighing on me is that somehow all of this involves Savannah Guthrie. You know her, the famous national television personality. It has to do with her career, or someone she has crossed paths with over the last few years. 3 months. No arrests, no body, and not a single explanation that makes any logical sense. Investigators chased down over 30,000 leads, but the case has hit a total standstill. Even with a reward over $1.2 million, no credible tip has cracked the code. From any visible perspective, it seems this criminal investigation has hit an insurmountable brick wall. But on April 30th, 2 of the FBI's most seasoned profilers spoke with Brian Entin. Their words didn't just add a new theory, they dismantled the one driving the case from the start. According to them, everyone was looking the wrong way. Nancy Guthrie was never the intended target. If it is your first time here, welcome to American Case File, where we reconstruct those final hours. If you have been following this case, what you hear next is the most crucial update ever covered. Stay until the end. For 3 months, the public assumed the motive for this crime was strictly financial. The Bitcoin ransom demands and the expired deadlines pointed the investigation directly in that same direction. Even the suspect profile on camera, a man moving with calculated control, wearing a backpack and gloves, suggested someone with a cold-blooded plan. Everyone assumed that the final goal of that plan was cash. In our previous video on this channel, we analyzed 2 specific details that changed everything. It was said the FBI was preparing for trial, building a solid case for the public. And the Bitcoin, the ransom currency at the heart of the demands, was never actually about money. Those 2 points shifted the investigation, yet left a haunting unanswered question, lurking beneath the surface. If this was not about money, then what was the true criminal motive behind it? That question was just answered, and not through a paper trail or some high-tech surveillance breakthrough. It came from behavioral science, 2 men who spent their FBI careers analyzing the criminal mind. In the early days of the Behavioral Science Unit, which later became the Behavioral Analysis Unit, the original profilers interviewed 38 serial offenders after they were convicted for their heinous crime. They would wait for the right moment to approach, just when the criminal realized the game was over. They saw they would spend life in prison and had lost all control over their own fate. At that point, they basically felt they were just going to die in complete and total obscurity. The one thing that keeps haunting me is that somehow this involves Savannah Guthrie. You know, the one, the famous television star. Not because she did anything wrong, but due to her job or someone she knew over the years. And maybe it is not weeks or months. I have mentioned in other podcasts and media outlets that during my days with the FBI in New York, I worked closely with the head of security at NBC. I visited once a month for cases involving various members of their on-air and off-air staff. Mostly women receiving all kinds of strange mail or unsettling phone calls back in those days. I don't doubt that over the years, Savannah received similar emails, social media messages, or worse. I hope analysts and detectives are checking every weird gushing email she received from obsessed fans. Messages she might have gotten over the last 5 years, at the very least. Then, after her mother appeared on the show, certain emails from specific people started to repeat. They said things like, "We love your mom," or "Why don't you bring her back on?" Because that points toward a stalking scenario targeting Savannah, making this case exceptionally out of the ordinary. As for why it remains unsolved, many typical causal factors for this kind of kidnapping are missing. Apparently, this wasn't a kidnapping for money. I have maintained that since the very first day. It has everything to do with Savannah. Mind you, I'm careful not to blame her or her family directly. But there is a stalker out there who could not get close to her. So he did the next logical thing, interpret it how you will, and targeted her mother. That's where the answer lies, where criminal behavioral analysts can offer the most help. Just show me a few consecutive emails, even over several years. Let us focus on that suspect and find out exactly where he was. It depends on the investigator. It falls on the people out there. And the most important part is that, as Jim said, and I fully agree, there is so much the FBI knows that we don't, things even the Pima County Sheriff's Department isn't aware of. The FBI holds information they aren't sharing. They won't release it until this mystery is solved. And I firmly believe it will be. It is only a matter of time. What you just heard from James Fitzgerald and Jim Clemente is not speculation. They are retired FBI profilers, giving an official documented assessment. And the central point of their statement is this: whoever took Nancy Guthrie wasn't looking for Nancy Guthrie. The real target was always Savannah. Savannah was reachable. Nancy was not. Retired profiler Raymond Carr added a detail that is critical to understand. He stated clearly that this person didn't just wake up one morning and decide to do this. It started much earlier, simpler, and less visible. He described it as a progression of constant stalking, one that escalated over time, moving from observation to attempts at contact, from simple interactions to something more dangerous, finally leading to the night of January 31st. What this means is the timeline of this crime doesn't start with a break-in. It begins years earlier with behavior no one saw as dangerous because back then, it wasn't. Fitzgerald pointed to a specific detail that supports this entire investigative structure. No ransom note was left at Nancy's house the night of the abduction. Think about that carefully. If you enter a home to collect a ransom, you leave a note. That's how the transaction begins. You communicate your terms. But at the scene, there was no note. The notes that appeared later per Fitzgerald's assessment did not come from the perpetrator at all. They were opportunists, people who saw a high-profile disappearance linked to a famous name and joined the chaos. The actual culprit had no interest in cryptocurrency exchanges or negotiating deadlines. His interest was something else entirely, something that cannot be transferred to a digital wallet. Today, the question centering this investigation isn't who wanted the money. It is who had an obsession with Savannah deep enough to arrive at her mother's doorstep. Before diving into the profile, let's close the loop on the Bitcoin trail, which connects to the profiler's findings. The family believed they found a way to track the Bitcoin address linked to the ransom demand. It failed. The FBI spent significant time and resources trying to locate the email used in those communications. They simply weren't able to do it. Harvey Levin, reporting on this, confirmed the trail went cold. That's a key point we need to emphasize. So over the weekend, Savannah Guthrie and her family said they would pay. That was Saturday. If they paid that day, the clock was running. We've passed the 12-hour mark, and they say no money has been deposited into that Bitcoin account. For many people who don't really understand what Bitcoin is or how it all works, could you give us some context on that? Just a little bit. Look, I'm no expert, but you can see what people deposit if you have the link, and we have it. What you can't see is who actually keeps the money. From what I gather, it is virtually impossible to find out, which is why a guy like this uses Bitcoin. Of course, maybe there's another account, or they were contacted separately. We simply have no way of knowing yet. However, there is zero evidence that anything like that actually happened in this specific case. Over the weekend, it doesn't look like they had any direct contact with the local police authorities. They aren't talking to the Guthrie family either. Everything has gone through local press and our own team. I believe your intuition is just as sharp as anyone else working here in the news media. And the police too. What do you think is actually going on in this disturbing scenario? I am being cautious, because this whole ransom payment situation is creating quite a lot of confusion. If someone went through the trouble of demanding that sum to fake a real kidnapping plot, why did it never happen? This is what this failed trail is actually revealing to us now. Whoever sent those notes knew exactly how to move anonymously through the digital landscape online. This isn't the behavior of an impulsive person. We aren't looking at someone making a desperate choice. They didn't just grab the first tool available. This person meticulously calculated every move after acting. They prepared for the consequences of the crime, not just the execution of the illegal act itself. This is exactly what Fitzgerald and Clemente described when they discussed the escalation of violence. It wasn't reactive. It was constructed. And that plan didn't start the night Nancy first went missing. It started much earlier. Now this is the part of the case that deserves much more media attention. By May, first investigators had already processed more than 30,000 tips regarding Nancy Guthrie. A source close to the investigation confirmed to News Nation that the case has stalled completely. Most of those tips led nowhere. Behind the scenes, they are facing quite a few dead ends. They keep reviewing evidence, as they have received thousands and thousands of leads during this time. They haven't processed them all yet, so it can't officially be considered a cold case just yet. Since we spoke, I have been interviewing several retired criminal profilers from the FBI agency. They have that behavioral analysis unit where they try to crack the identity of a potential suspect. I'm curious about your thoughts on their theories since you are a local who knows the area. Most agree that statistically, it must be someone who already knew Nancy personally before the incident. Not necessarily a relative or a close friend, but someone who had some form of contact with her. Maybe a contractor or anyone else, but certainly not a stranger. What is your take on that? They are the experts in this field, and I would not dare to disagree with them at all, especially if several profilers agree. I always suspected it was someone who was truly obsessed with her. Whether they knew her directly or just knew of Savannah, none of that would surprise me right now. Do you think, and this is something they mentioned, that this might not even be a ransom case? Could the whole thing have just been some kind of elaborate cover-up? I think so. What about you? I agree, because when you talk about 1 Bitcoin, or even half a Bitcoin, that just sounds wrong. Usually you would demand $10 million. That is how I believe a real kidnapping would work. I think something happened to Nancy from the start, and this was part of their strategic shift. Let us throw out that bait to mislead investigators and move forward with the plan from there. 30,000 tips, and the case is stalled. That is a number that is truly shocking to hear. But what this actually tells us is something of extreme importance. The key to this case isn't in that sea of public tips. It never has been. Because if the experts are right, this individual moved in a circle very close to Savannah Guthrie. If they were part of her public life, 30,000 phone calls were never going to find them. The key lies within a very intimate circle and a series of very specific correspondences. There is a clear behavioral pattern. Someone specific made contact in a very particular way back then. This was recorded somewhere, and at the time, it might not have seemed to have any real importance. They are stuck in many dead ends as they continue to review every single piece of evidence. Thousands of tips have arrived that haven't been fully analyzed yet, which is why it isn't a cold case. Fitzgerald was direct about this. Integral. Must review every piece of correspondence Savannah Guthrie received over the last 5 years. Letters, emails, social media, and contact attempts that were filed away and then ignored by everyone. Because in that official record, there is almost certainly a name, a pattern where someone crossed the line. And right now, that single moment could be the most important piece of evidence in this whole investigation. The reward is $1,200,000. It is a life-changing fortune, and it has been there unclaimed for 3 months already. In cases of connected networks, money usually breaks the silence sooner or later. But here the silence persists, implying witnesses fear the person responsible more than they want the reward. Or perhaps money does not motivate them, or they do not realize their information is actually valuable. Both possibilities lead to the same place. The answer is very close. It hides in a small specific circle, and someone in there already holds a key piece. If you find this investigative coverage helpful, take a moment to hit like and subscribe to American Case File. We are following this development closely, and the next update could be the one that finally changes everything. He saw what it was immediately. Even when I called him on the phone, he already knew. He said, "I think she was kidnapped for ransom." I asked what. "But why would you say that?" And then it sounds so foolish now, but I just did not want to believe it was true. I just said, "Do you think it is my fault?" He said, "Sorry, honey, but yes, maybe." But I already knew. Do you think I hope not? I mean, we still do not know anything. Honestly, we do not know anything. No. We have no idea what happened. So I do not know if it is because of my mother and someone thought she had money. That they could get easy money. It would make sense, I guess, but we just do not know. But yes, it is probably that, and it is just too much to bear. Thinking that I brought this danger to her bed, that this was all my fault. Before any expert, Savannah Guthrie had already stated it clearly herself. In her first interview after her mother vanished speaking with Hoda Kotb, she confessed what no one wanted to say. That it was unbearable thinking she drew this to her mother's door, that it happened because of her. It is not just a daughter's pain. According to 2 highly experienced former FBI profilers, it is the most accurate statement on this case. Savannah understood the motive before the investigators did. Because she understood something that no one from the outside could see with total clarity. Someone was watching not Nancy but Savannah, and Nancy was just the easy point of entry. Who is this person? No names yet, as there are no arrests or suspects publicly identified. But a profile exists based on behavioral science expert evaluations and the trail of evidence left behind. This is not a career criminal. Their behavior does not fit someone who commits random crimes. The impulse here is psychological, a fixation that grew over time and gained a lot of intensity. And eventually that shifted from thought to action. Carr described that escalation curve very well. It starts small with distant observation, contact attempts, and testing the boundaries of the victim. Then at some point, a decision is made. The passive becomes active, and the distant becomes direct. To know this much about Nancy's home and her routine, the attacker had to be exposed. Not necessarily physical contact, but a constant attention to the public life of Savannah. Enough time to find her private world and the exact location of her mother, her living situation and daily rhythms. That knowledge is not obtained with a simple search. It comes from deliberate study. Former FBI Assistant Director John Miller stated something important, that the person responsible is very likely a local. It comes from deliberate study. Former FBI Director John Miller claimed the person responsible is likely local, someone with highly detailed knowledge of the Tucson area and Nancy's personal daily living conditions. Local knowledge, escalating behavior, and a psychological motive, a target chosen for her connections, not her possessions. These aren't isolated fragments pointing in random directions. They are consistent data points that align perfectly. This data converges on a very specific type of individual and a very particular geographic proximity. And that man caught on Nancy's security camera, the one moving with such cold, deliberate control. Clemente and Fitzgerald don't believe he's the mastermind. He looks like someone executing another person's design. His calm is real, but small inconsistencies suggest he wasn't the one thinking 10 steps ahead. He was simply following the specific steps that someone else had already taken the time to map out. This means that behind what we see on video, there is a second hidden layer to this crime. Someone who planned everything, identified the target, studied the environment, and started the engine. Someone never seen on camera. The investigation now has a direction that didn't exist after April 30th. It's no longer following a dead-end digital trail. Now it follows a behavioral trail. 5 years of correspondence reviewed through the lens of a psychological profile. Contact attempts that were dismissed or filed away are now being re-examined under a completely different question. Not if this person is dangerous, but if they are the one. The CW network airs a special May 6th. That broadcast will bring a second wave of public attention to the mysterious disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Those waves create pressure. Pressure on those who know something, and on the person responsible for all of this. In cases like this, pressure often causes that one single mistake, capable of changing the entire course. An overheard conversation or behavior that finally seems strange to someone who used to justify it. One detail connects to another, and suddenly the entire image finally starts to make perfect sense. The investigative window hasn't closed, the reward is still active, and those with the final answer are still out there. If anything said here connects with something you saw or heard, or someone whose behavior changed back then. Someone with an unusual fixation on Savannah Guthrie, or someone whose actions or words are burned into your memory. Since January 31st, investigators have needed to hear from you. Send tips to the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI line at tips.fbi.gov. The reward in this case exceeds $1,200,000 and remains unclaimed by anyone. That money is there for this exact reason, a lead from someone who connects one detail to another. If you've been following this case and something is nagging at your mind, now is the time to act. 3 months ago, Nancy Guthrie left a family dinner and returned home. She never made it to church the next day. Her phone was still inside the house, and all of her belongings remained completely untouched. Between those 2 moments, someone entered her home with a plan developed for much longer than just one night. 2 former FBI profilers say the plan wasn't about her, but about her famous daughter. And Nancy, a private woman who never sought headlines, was simply the open door that someone decided to exploit. The question the case has yet to answer publicly is whether Nancy Guthrie had already crossed paths with this person. If she recognized something, or if she knew in those last moments that what was happening wasn't just random, that the situation had a face she might have already seen before. Investigators believe the answer exists, and that it is already properly documented somewhere. They think it waits in a file, a message, or a memory, not yet linked to the right question. When that connection happens, and experts believe it will, it'll seem like it was always there waiting to be seen clearly. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 3 months. The case remains active, the reward remains unclaimed, and this long silence is becoming far too heavy to sustain. If what you heard helped you understand this investigation, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth details. Every update we publish is based on the same thing, facts first and always, from registered official sources. Nothing that can't be backed up. We'll be here whenever a new breakthrough emerges in this mysterious case. And from what we've seen, that key moment might be much closer than it actually appears.